Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our fourth of five programs on the science of consciousness. We've reviewed a number of areas over the last several days, from remote viewing to mediumship and clairvoyance. And today we want to focus on the power of intent, which all of us know just from our own lives is an extraordinarily important and useful tool of consciousness, the setting of intent. And so it's in that spirit of the intent of a wonderful session today that I want to welcome my good friend and colleague, Peter Mary, who will tee up our various speakers for this today's session. So Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, and we're shortening the introductions a little bit today because it's great to have Lynne McTaggart with us. She's only got until 20 past, but we wanted to give her the opportunity, given the amount of work that she's done in the field of intention. So as Jim said, we're looking at this whole area of consciousness grounded in the science, in the context of, as you all know, the UAP Disclosure Act and the realization that, well, we really need to start learning about this consciousness stuff because it seems to be how the extraterrestrial beings operate. And so if we're going to be successful in communicating and engaging and understanding the technology, then we're going to need to understand consciousness. So on the first day, we looked at, the scientific research, the thorough work that was done at Princeton over 28 years. And then we looked at how we can see things outside of time and space through the remote viewing practice. So how we can use our consciousness to go outside of our physical location, both in time and space, and see things that are going on there in places that, according to materialist science, we should never be able to go. And then yesterday, we looked at the communication side, so the telepathy between people and other beings. So a little bit more proactive, let's say, than just the viewing or the perceiving of information and things. And today we're getting a step more proactive, which is, so what happens when we actually don't just use our conscious awareness as a sensor, but we actually proactively engage with the field of information and energy to increase the probability of certain things happening. So the use of our intention and attention, if we want to go mind as intention, heart as attention, combined to co-create in this field of consciousness with the world around us. So we've got three people joining us today to explore this. We'll ask Lynn to kick us off. And then Sujit Ravindran is with us, who has done a lot of work around the science of manifestation. So we'll have a chat with Sujit. And then Andeweg, who has applied intention work to large-scale systems, large areas of land and organizations, who can only join us at the bottom of the hour. So he'll be with us for the last hour today. So great. Lynn, thank you for taking the time. We know it's a tight schedule that you're on. So wonderful that you could join us. If you're able to turn on your video and unmute, then we can kick off with you. There we are.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for listening. And Peter, thank you for inviting me. I wish I were able to stay longer, but there's enough time here to share with you some of the remarkable things that I've witnessed and I've also documented with the power of intention, both in large groups and small. So I'm going to share my screen with you so I can share some of this information with you. Just give me one moment and I will sort this out for you. So I have limited time, but I want to show you one extraordinary thing that's happened in the many intention experiments that I've run 41 to date now, and I'll tell you about them in a second as soon as I can share my screen. Let's just do this here. Okay. Right, so I'm going to just get rid of something that will block you being able to see it, and we'll start it here. There we go. So a little background. In 2007, I had finished my book about the field, which some of you may know about, which was an overview of the new science. And as an investigative reporter originally by training, I was curious about the whole idea of manifestation, which was a word floating around everywhere with law of attraction at the time. And I kept thinking to myself, well, how far can we take this? Are we talking about a tiny shift of a quantum particle, for instance? Or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? And I also was very curious about what happens when more than one person is thinking the same thought at the same time. Does it magnify the effect? So I began a thing called the intention experiment and wrote a book about it too, to launch that whole idea. And I decided to work with various scientists working at prestigious universities who were exploring consciousness research. And I also wanted to engage my readers around the globe, and the field was in 30 languages. So I had a decent batch of readers out there to take part in these periodic experiments. So we would set up something in a scientific lab or have scientists measure something out in the field. After asking my readers around the globe or in an audience when I was speaking in front of a group to send the same intention at the exact same time. Of the 41, and we've run everything from trying to make seeds grow faster to purifying water to lowering violence in war-torn or violent areas to healing someone of PTSD. Of those 41, 37 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. One of the violence studies that we carried out was sending an intention to lower violence in an area of the officially most violent place in America, which is St. Louis, Missouri. And we showed, working with a professor of statistics, Dr. Jessica Utz, taking data from 3 years before and 6 months afterward, that everywhere around the area we focused on, which was Fairground, a section of St. Louis, had violence continuing to go up, including St. Louis as a whole. But with Fairground, violence went down by 43%. Now, after I started doing these intention experiments, I wanted to shrink it all down. So I started experimenting with small groups of just 8 or so. And that's what I want to show you. I want to focus on the extraordinary things that can happen in just 10 minutes. That's all we hold an intention for. We don't do it for hours. We don't do any kind of priming. 10 minutes, even working with total novices. This is what happens. So here's an example of it. This is what one 10-minute group intention did for Esther, who had stage 4 melanoma. She came to a workshop of mine in wonderful Broughton Hall, and I'm sure if you work with Peter Murray, you know this place very well. He introduced it to us, and it is the site of our annual retreat now. So I had invited Esther and her son, Stephen. They both signed up. They're from Switzerland. After they signed up, they didn't know if they could make the journey because she was diagnosed with melanoma and she was getting very weak, and the doctors said she had only 3 or 4 months to live. She did an intention with her group. I put people in Power of 8 groups, as I call them, on the first day, and this is what happened.
My mother said that she had a lot of bleedings, and I said, go talk with the doctor. And then she said, you have to get it checked out. So basically, the week after that, they found out that she had cancer in the uterus, in the whole body, metastasis everywhere. And the doctor said you have 2-3 more months to live, and that's it. And what made all the difference was that one intention we did for her in the library, in this Broughton Hall, old-fashioned library. We had it was before we went for dinner. We said let's do one here. We were sitting in a circle, and I was guiding and I was leading, and these 10 minutes felt like an eternity. And I know my mother. My mother is a natural doctor, and she's a therapist, and she gave so many people healing. But what I witnessed in these 10 minutes that really felt like an eternity was such a deep healing. We all felt it, but Mom said, I'm healed. And, maybe someone else would laugh about it, but I didn't laugh. We all didn't laugh. And I think that was really, and she sees it that way as well, that was the beginning of her healing, because that seed of healing was planted in that very moment. And the belief that she is healed and can be healed, at the end it's always difficult to say what was it, what was the factor. But for her and for me, for all of us, it was very clear that healing started then. And she didn't say, I am healing, she said, I am healed. Of course, there were a lot of setbacks in the process, and of course she did other treatments, all natural treatments. But for me, that very moment changed everything. My mom, they checked her up, the radiologists, they checked her up again. They do not find any trace of cancer anymore.
Just 10 minutes. That's all it took. Now, what about genetic diseases, where people are told you're going to have to live with it? For instance, like Lisa, she had a genetic liver disorder. It was an alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, which meant her liver was full of scarring, fibrosis, and her spleen was enlarged. Doctors said she was a candidate for a liver transplant. She came for the first time to a group who had been holding a Power of 8 session, and this is what happened.
I heard that you come in at 4 o'clock, and it's every 10 minutes, and I came in, and it was, you held the hands, and I did literally feel the healing take place. I felt it was very. I got emotional, and then I did feel things moving around the body, and I left, and I kept thinking I could feel something in my liver area. Right. But I always remember in my diary, I wrote it down, about 9 o'clock that night I was in bed, and I said to my husband, I feel things shifting, and I felt immense energy going around the body, and then so shooting out on my left leg like a cold energy. Something was shifting, and more than that, in my head I knew that something had taken place, and I didn't have to worry about it anymore. Wow. That's how I felt. And I was thinking about this when I knew I was coming to see you today. I have never Googled alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency in a year. So then they called me up to go for a scan, and it sounds awful because people are watching this, but I kept putting the appointment off because I knew it wasn't a priority. Yeah. So something, I was on holiday, and in the olden days I would have cancelled, but I was like, I'm fine. So I think it was about October time I went for a scan, and I got a letter in November in black and white that said that my spleen is now a normal size, and I had no fibrosis of the liver.
How did you feel about that?
Just amazing. Absolutely incredible.
Can't happen.
Yeah. And I have 2 letters. So you have the black
from
and white.
From a professor?
I'm a consultant.
You're consultant.
So it's kind of, it's black and white. We can't argue with it.
You can't argue with it. Her spleen and her liver got healed with one 10-minute intention. That's how powerful group intention can be. But then I started thinking about it. When I was seeing these healings in workshops of mine and talks I was giving, I wondered, well, what'll happen if I put people into groups for an entire year? Will it heal everything in their lives? Will they completely transform. So I began doing that back in 2015. I started running classes where I would hold it for a year, teach people all the rudimentaries, all of the ways of using intention not only to manifest things, but also to heal relationships, to overcome negativity, and all kinds of things like that, based on what I'd learned from a mix of the science and also studying the commonalities between so-called intention masters, master healers, Qigong masters, Buddhist monks. And this is the kind of thing that happened. For instance, I'm picking an extreme case. Mitchell Dean is a psychologist, and he's had lifelong clinical depression, which is why I've disguised his image. You'll see it in the next video, because it's not a good look for a psychologist to have suicidal depression, but he did when he joined. And lots of other things were wrong with his life. He had writer's block, he was overweight, he had all kinds of issues that he wanted to deal with. And he felt stuck in everything, including his relationships. Here's what happened.
What happened right around the beginning of that time was realizing that a lot of this is related to how my liver processes toxins. And that had never been named in all the years I'd been working on this. And suddenly it became apparent that the second level of liver filtration apparently wasn't working very well. And we got a hold of that one, began to treat that with herbs and supplements, and it really helped. I think, though, there's something more synergistic than just an allopathic idea that this cured the depression. It was like at the same time, I found my Qigong practice was getting much deeper. My meditations were deeper. I was finding I was much more able to just take better care of myself. During that Helios time, my practice got much more interesting, and I began to integrate ways of working that I'd wanted to do for years that had never quite worked. And so all of those have their own sort of antidepressant effect, right? It was like everything got healthier. It doesn't go nearly as deep. It doesn't happen nearly as often. I can still have blue days, but they feel more like blue days instead of really, really heavy ones. And so it's made a huge difference. Yeah. In that same process, I lost a good 15 pounds. Yes. I mean, it was such an interesting time. My trainer at one point kept joking, I don't know what's going on with you, man. It's like you're aging backward. Like, this shouldn't be possible at 45 that your muscle mass is going up while your body fat's going down, working out once a week. What exactly are you doing, man?
And not only that, Mitchell overcame his writer's block. He improved his relationships, and he got back to music, which he had abandoned for a long time. His entire life healed. And I see this routinely in the master classes I run, the Power of 8 groups I hold. And it's something extraordinary. Now, there are a lot of reasons why this works so powerfully. I don't have time to go into all of them, but I will share with you one thing that we learned with a study we did, putting EEG caps on novice intenders who were part of Power of 8 groups. I worked with a team of neuroscientists at Life University, and we thought that the brainwave signatures are going to look just like meditation. They looked nothing like meditation. What was happening was that certain parts of the brain weren't increasing as they do with meditation. They were turning off. There were a quieting of all brain waves, but particularly the parts of the brain that make us feel separate or depressed. The quieting of the parietal lobes, they sit toward the back of the head. They help us determine what's me, what's not me. They were dialed way down, and so were the right frontal lobes, the part of the brain that can be involved with worry, doubt, negativity. So what we were seeing was a turning off of and blurring of the boundary between what's me and what's not me. These were people in a state of ecstatic oneness, almost identical to the work of Dr. Andrew Newberg, who studied Buddhist monks and Sufi masters during chanting. And his his discovery of what was going on in their brains was virtually identical to what happened with the intenders in Power of 8 groups. But there's something more in the intention experiments, my big scale studies, that happens with people that eclipses everything else I've been talking about, which is what happens to the senders. I do surveys of people who take part of my intention experiments, and I've run, as I say, a number. Now, one of the most powerful was with Dr. Salah Al-Rashid, who is like the Deepak of the Middle East. I teamed up with him to do one on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And then we did something, and we had an experience that was even amplified in a larger experiment I did in the end of 2017. We decided to bring warring tribes together. And in this case, we brought together Arabs and Israelis to do an intention for Jerusalem, which was experiencing a lot of violence. Now, we had special equipment, so I could put cameras in 9 different locations. So there are cameras in conference rooms in 8 different Arab cities, from Kuwait City to cities in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, etc. And the 9th camera is in an auditorium of Israeli Jews. So we intended to focus on the old city, the old part of Jerusalem, and particularly the Damascus Gate area. Here is what happened. I did the intention, and now you'll see what happened between the different parties. Now remember, these people were refusing to speak to each other before this event. I had to be the broker for the whole thing, because even the heads of the Israelis and even Dr. Al-Rashid himself, who's a noted peace person, they didn't want to talk to each other. That's how much these have grown up. Both sides have grown up to hate each other. But this is what happened afterward. I have someone from
Amman. This amazing experience. We all here crying at the room, our tears falling down.
Like a big party. I like to have fun, so I feel fun. I feel like I was young again. Like I'm in a big party.
Like a commercial that you see on the road, and it was written, the peace is already here. Yes.
Jeddah in Saudi Arabia.
I saw myself there, and I felt very strong love for the Jews, in spite of our raising up to hate the Jews. Beautiful feelings, beautiful images of unity, oneness, love, and peace.
We live in Jerusalem. We know it personally. And I've seen images of hugging, of soldiers and Arab people, of kindness one to another, of flowers all around Damascus Gate. This is so emotional. And I've seen the 4 quarters of the old city as the 4 rooms of my personal heart.
Yes, you're on Abu Dhabi.
Israelis are dancing, the Palestinians, they hug each other, and we are with the Israelis, like we share peace and love, which is an amazing thing. And I want to thank you and everybody participate in this participation.
Tunisia.
Yes, Tunisia. We saw a lot of children running and laughing. And there is a lot of butterflies and wearing a white clothes and running. And there is a loud voice of laughing.
You took me to the place I really love. I saw there a sunny day, lots of people laughing, lots of joy and happiness. I wish I could stay there. I wish I didn't come back.
My name is Fatima Salami, and the peace in Arabic means salam, and my name is Salami. So I feel in peace, I feel in love. I love all people in the whole world. I love you. I love you so much, and I feel full of love and full of peace. Your God is my God. I love you.
My name is Lily from Jerusalem. It's so overwhelming, the possibility to be connected with you, our sisters in Amman and in Damascus and in Iran and all over. We are thousands, hundreds of thousands of women here saying enough. It's about time to unite. We are one.
And that was the most amazing part of it all. What I discovered was not only were the senders having experiences in sending, but they were also having experiences in their lives. They became more peaceful. They, in participating in a group intention, discovered that the heart, even with enemies, leaps across the fence. And I've found that over and over and over again. Something happens as a sender. In my master classes with my year-long Power of Eight groups, the senders heal as much as the recipients. So what do you need to do with intention? I'd have to spend 6 weeks talking to you about how to learn to do intention and to really master it based on all of the study I've made. But I will give you one big important key, and that is to be specific. What I've discovered is the people who tell the universe exactly what they want in great specific detail are more likely to manifest with intention than those who have generalities. That goes against a lot of urban myths, but over my 41 intention experiments, when we've been highly specific, they've worked. When we've done something very general, like sending love to water, it didn't work. So that's the really important piece of it. Now, to find out more about me, I'm going to have to go, but I run a year-long course. Peter told me to tell you about it, and I think it's listed on the curriculum for Ubiquity now, is the Intention Masterclass, where I teach people for 12 hours, live and interactive over successive Saturdays, 2 hours each Saturday. And we learn all of the keys to intention mastery, as well as how to use it with relationships, even the people who disagree with everything you stand for. As I've shown you, we can get over polarization really quickly. We just need to do intentions together. So I teach that, and then we put people in groups. And you work with your group for an hour a week for the rest of the year, plus attend some clinics with me, intention clinics, where we go over all of this. If you want to find out more, it's lynnmctaggart.com, and there's a QR code for it. If you want to investigate all of the other things I do, I have loads of free materials on my website, particularly with my 8 Revolution. You check that out. I have a whole batch of free tools for people to become spiritual activists and use the power of intention to heal their communities. So there's loads of that and all kinds of information. Check it out on lynnmctaggart.com. Come to my intention experiments and participate. We've done a load for Israel and Gaza. 30,000 people have participated thus far. We have more work to do. And we've seen that their lives, the rebound effect is extraordinary. Intention experiments are always free, so I invite you to come along too. Thank you so much, Peter.
Lovely. Thank you, Lynn. And I know you've gone over a little bit the time you actually were available. So thanks for spending that time with us, and amazing work as everybody in the chat is witnessing. I put a direct link into the masterclass in the chat. So if anybody wants to know more about it, it's there. You can use it for credit towards Ubiquity programs. So any students, feel free. And yeah, I know you've got a rush, Lynn. So thanks again for joining us, and good luck with all the work, and maybe see you again at Broughton one day.
I hope so. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, Lynn. Great. Wow. Take a breath to kind of recover from that, as it were. That was an intense download by her in a very compact time, with obviously some very strong results that she's been getting there as well. So I'm now going to invite Sujit to join us. Sujit, so if you can unmute and turn your video on. So I got to know Sujit on a pilgrimage that we did together to Assisi over a period of 8 days in Italy, a group of 12 men. And oh, great, that's good timing. Here is Hans coming in as well. So I'll just say hi to Hans as well. Hans, great, welcome.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much for having me.
Great. I was just introducing Sujit.
I'm sorry, I'm late. But...
That's okay. Lynn has just finished her talk, and I was just introducing Sujit, and then we'll come to you. We'll come to you afterwards. But great you're able to be here. So Sujit, yes. So Sujit, I got to know, as I say, on this pilgrimage with a group of 11 of us. There were actually, weren't there? And very powerful experience, which was a combination of the walking and various exercises and things that we did with Sujit along the way. And part of that journey, he was telling me about some of the work he did around the science of manifestation, his connection to the Center for Quantum Activism and things. So I thought when we were thinking about co-creation and manifestation and intention and things, it would be lovely, Sujit, to hear a little bit of your story and what you've discovered around the whole science of manifestation as you've been going along. So feel free to introduce yourself a bit and tell us a little about what you do and what you've discovered about this whole manifestation process. And then we'll come to Hans, and then we'll have a chat between us.
Thank you, Peter, for the invitations and greetings from India. It's indeed, I'm looking back at the walk we had together. That was September last year. It was absolute magic. It was, wasn't it a practice? A practice on intention, co-creation, manifestation, expansion of consciousness, and all of that. Yeah, I'm just wondering, what is it that I should share with you as an introduction? There might be a lot for me to share, but perhaps the most relevant bits and pieces, let me see, is that, I grew up in India, and I grew up with great consciousness masters since the age of 4, since my age of 4. And so this whole idea of self-expansion, self-inquiry, understanding, practicing the idea of expansion of consciousness was very, very native. And of course, Peter, as a kid, you don't really think too much about, the science of stuff. You just celebrate life. You just celebrate beauty. Just celebrate oneness. You just celebrate bliss. And that's how I grew up, really with a lot of these masters who were, also very deliberate about manifestation. And, India, as Peter, as you know, is also considered by many as the land of, quote unquote, miracles. That I grew up actually watching miracles. Miracles around, people healing instantaneously. I remember yesterday you said, Peter, you had a session on telepathy. I've seen so many daily acts of telepathy, synchronicity, time traveling to the past and the future, out-of-body experiences, all of that. And I can share stories and stories with you. And I look at the amazing work that Lynn does, and I'm like, wow, this is so amazing, that when more and more research can be done to understand that intention, manifestation, co-creation, etc., are very, very deliberate acts, very conscious acts. They can be for most of us. And there is very, very advanced, precise science behind it. Then people get more inspired to jump on board and start experimenting with the non-material. But as a kid, for me, all of this was wondrous. It was like, wow, this is so natural. And it was only when I was starting to become a teenager that I started to apply my thought, my brains, my reason, my logic to really understand, are these random acts that happen to random people, like, telepathy and synchronicity and time bending and all these phenomena. And that's when I started to dive into what was understood, at least in my indigenous civilization, for easily more than 3,000 years. And in some cases, up to 7,000 years. And for the last 20 years, it's really, Peter, been one of me jumping, going back into the past, picking the brains of these masters, rummaging through the science and the records available, and understanding, of course, these sages keep saying that manifestation, miracles, creation, co-creation, intention, etc., are exact sciences, are deliberate acts that can be done through practice. I wanted to understand, the science. And as I've got older and older in these last, 29 years of really holding space for, eminent women, men, and people of all genders like you, Peter, we've had the opportunity to practice together. More and more, I see being called to hold space in the institutional and organizational worlds, in the organs of systems of society, in the East and the West, North and the South, in politics, governance, administration, business, non-profits, but also systems like education systems, healthcare systems, prison, especially with men. In all these areas, these practices, these experiments in the last 18 years in particular, it's been full-time. I'm starting to notice that, powerful people, I mean powerful people like you, Peter. I don't mean powerful in the sense of having egoic power, but this kind of selfless, humble intention that you carry for the purposive evolution of humanity. Such powerful people, they are actually starting to feel restless inside from within systems. And these are members of parliaments, these are director generals, these are ministers, policy makers, top-level CEOs, social leaders, women, men, people of all genders. They're starting to realize, they're feeling restless that, the material reality that we know does not explain some of the experiences that I'm having. Sometimes when I'm able to mobilize individuals and groups, it's not because of rationale, it's not because of reason, it's not because of fear or force. Something else is at play. And really holding space for them to cross that chasm, to walk over that bridge, to understand that there is a universe, there are universes beyond the time and space paradigm, the paradigm, the realm that we can experience with our five senses. Beyond that, there are these realms where miracles, wonder, magic, mischief can happen. And that has really been the last 18 years, Peter, where I've actually devoted myself. Unlike my masters, I've not been all my time living in monastic life. I wanted to kind of like, jump into the worldly experience and live and prototype, that miracle, that science that is within our power, that we can manifest anything that we want, of which intention is one thing. And there's a very, very exact science that has 5 steps in it. But, if you'd like, we can go there. That experiment has been something that has been keeping me consumed in these last 18 years. And, I've had this fortune now very recently, Peter, to actually, do the walk with you and do some practice together. So that prototyping of the expansion of that science of the non-material, of consciousness, of quantum science continues. And I'm just checking in with you, Peter, to see, what else would you like me to elaborate upon in my intro?
Thanks, Sujit. I think everyone would be very interested to hear, your conclusions around the 5 steps, and it might be something that Hans can build off as well in terms of what they've learned with the ECOintention work, and I'm sure is kind of closely related to what Lynn will have discovered in her work too. So please, do just share with us, briefly, what you've kind of learned in your studies and through your experience.
Definitely. Peter, firstly, important out of respect for many, many sages and masters before me. This science has been known for thousands of years. And you picked the right word in asking this question to me, Peter. You said, what are my conclusions rather than what are my discoveries? And I do not want to be arrogant enough to say that these are my discoveries, so I'm trademarking it, I'm copyrighting it. No, humanity has known it. Mothers of newborns have experienced it, generations after generations. People who have non-localized themselves have accessed the science of manifestation over and over again every day of their lives. People who have madly, truly, deeply fallen in love with each other have experienced it. Animals have that experience very, very often. People with pets. So in many, many different settings, also in the connection with the non-local, the infinite, the consciousness, nature, the divine, God, whatever label you put it, people have very, very often have had connection and experience of that experience of manifestation. Now, indeed, so it has been known to humanity. And yes, is there a very deliberate, very exact science to it? Yes. In the last 29 years of my own research, through all indigenous sciences of many different lands and writing many, many books. Yeah, true. I have actually concluded that science does exist, Peter. And number 2, here is a good news, that it can be a very choice-making, conscious act for each one of us. And at least, Peter, to that science, where I come from. And actually, the beauty of that science is that once you understand it, you will go, aha. And the best part is, like we look at kids and how they live with wonder and architect miracles. You understand, yes, even that is possible if only you would master that science and expand the self. Now, I was referring, Peter, indeed, to those 5 steps. And, I have translations of those 5 steps in English. So, those of you who don't speak Sanskrit, you're safe. It's okay. Yeah. And of all of that, when we talk about creation, we say, hey, what is creation? I want to create a pizza. Or I want to create, let's say, a painting. What happens? It all starts, with a thought. And any thought can be an intention. And we'd say, I've created something when an intention has been materialized. Then suddenly, voila, here in front of me is a pizza. However, if you look at how these advanced sages, these masters, go about deliberately creating things that is unfathomable to the ordinary mind, you're like, okay, I get it. Now I understand. And, that thought, that's where it all begins, Peter. And the amazing work that Lynn has done with intentions actually validates that indeed, at an individual level, indeed, Peter, when you or a group of people around you, when you can be unified around one thought, and that thought is not just something that is in your head, but a thought that is fully embodied, then the second step from intention becomes one of, roughly translated, the illumination. There is this moment of eureka that must happen to us. And it's not, again, something that happens by chance. For folks, you look at the stories of, Western philosophers and sages like Albert Einstein and Archimedes, Tesla. We get a wrong impression that the illumination is something that happens to us, rather than we can deliberately create that for ourselves. So from intention, the second step is really welcoming that illumination. We can create the conditions, like, when we were on the pilgrimage, Peter. What were we doing? We were actually non-localizing ourselves to that extent, where we suddenly become a field of infinite possibilities where, poof, 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 the illuminations start popping up. Sometimes all it takes is a few breaths together, or actually touching another person on the heart, or looking each other in the eye, and poof, the answer emerges. That is important because it's that illumination that moves that intention from the unmanifest to the first space of manifestation. You can feel it at the level of passion, at the level of love. In the body, you become embodied at a cellular level. You can feel, yes, this path is meant for me. And thereafter, the third step of manifestation in the indigenous science of manifestation is the step of imagination. Imagination is not exactly a good word. Perhaps the right word is ethereal manifestation, Peter. That means now, like children do all the time, like they do, you are able to create that one material thing, whether it's a cup, or whether it's a pizza, or a pen, or a notepad, or a note, whatever it is. Now you are able to create, you materialize it at the ethereal level. That is at the level of your thought. You can fully envision how that pizza is going to look, or what are the values that are going to underpin my romantic relationship. That is ethereal manifestation. The easiest, simplest word to use would be imagination. That means at the level of our ethereal self, we are now able to construct, architect it. That is now so much more real than just an illumination or an intention. That is the third step, imagination. And then something happens, something that all these entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley knows, all these venture capitalists in the Silicon Valley knows, and that is the step of infusion. You have a great idea. You know what? I'm going to go out there and I'm going to create an online healing opportunity based on energetic practices. Maybe you have an idea and you know exactly how you're going to administer that service. But then there is a moment where really the sperm penetrates the egg. And in Sanskrit, there's a very specific word for that. I'll not bore you with that, Peter. But a moment of infusion happens. Like, poof, out of the blue, you have this idea, you have this dream, and you receive some social media post saying like, you know what, Peter, I'm inspired by that post you made. You know what? I'd like to create a website for you. Or a venture capitalist shows up and says like, you know what, I know you're a crazy man with crazy ideas, but this is the craziest of it all. I want to hear. I want to just give you $35,000. Or just out of the blue, a random person will come and say like, you know what, you know, I love the thought that you shared. Count me in. I am your first customer. It happens. Poof. That is now things materializing, it becoming real now. That infusion must happen. That is now, you see, from the causal to the subtle, it's becoming grosser. Now you have a customer, or you have a website, or you have a legal entity, or it's the infusion of the first infusion of life has happened. That's important. Otherwise, there's no manifestation. And then over to the very last stage of manifestation, the fifth step is materialization. From there, all of life being a prototype, all of life being lived not at home or in nature or in an apartment or anything, no, in a laboratory. What are we doing? We're just materializing. And the feature of materialization, Peter, now is that, you know what? With my 5 senses, I can experience it. I can feel it with my touch. I can smell it with my smell, with my nose. I can see it with my eyes. With my 5 senses, I can relate to that creation. It's become gross. Now it is materialized. Those are the 5 steps through which all of creation happens. Anything, you point out anything that has been created or that is waiting to be created or that is being created as we speak, these 5 steps apply. However, and this would be my last statement on that science, Peter, and I'm actually involved in so many modern scientific experiments with institutes in different parts of the world, especially in the West, where there is such a thirst, such a zest for scientific understanding. If we start mastering the self and the science, then, the way I put these 5 steps, it doesn't have to be time consuming. It's not like it is something that is going to happen in 15 years from now for you, or 5 years from now, or 3 years from now. What I've witnessed growing up with sages, masters, is miracles. They can actually manifest something out of thin air. And I'm talking about this in reality. I had one experience, Peter, where I was actually on a certain apprenticeship project. I happened to be in a very dry part of India in the northwest. And there was a village or a region there that has not seen rains for more than 2 years. And a lot of their cattle died, crops disappeared, famine, all of that. And this happened in front of my eyes. One day, a mystic walked by. And as you know, most parts of India is driven by faith, not by facts. Like 50 years ago, 70 years ago, a lot of different parts of the West also used to be driven by faith. Like, we would listen to our priests and our doctors and lawyers and blindly believe them. There was faith. And these people, the villagers, they have faith in these mystics and masters and sages. They run over to this mystic and say, please help, we are suffering. And what does the mystic do? He says, like, gather all the villagers, come under this tree, let's sit down. And he starts chanting. It's not meditation, like, Lynn was talking a little bit about different types of inner interventions that non-localizes the self, that makes all of us one mind. He starts chanting and he invites all the people, all the villagers to join. And they join. And I notice, they're all together in that chant. About 45 minutes later, dark clouds in the sky. And about 75 minutes, an hour and a half later, maybe, there was like a big downpour of rain. That is just 90 minutes, maybe 75 minutes. I didn't keep count. It felt that way. You could call that a miracle. It's just that those 5 steps, intention to illumination, to imagination, to infusion, to materialization, got squeezed through the experience of oneness. That it was irresistible for the universe. Universe had to collaborate for manifestation to happen so fast.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just leave it there with the storytelling.
Thanks so much, Sujit. Beautiful story, and thanks for summarizing the steps. I'm kind of noticing in the chat how the Western mind so eagerly wants to grab a method. It's like, what are the 5 steps? 1, 2, 3. Oh, now I have them. Okay, I got the answer. Whereas it's actually what life and the universe does all the time. So we think like it's a special method, as you say, and it's been taught thousands and thousands of years. But there is, as you also said, a conscious, deliberate choice to engage in it. And a key part of that is getting the ego self out of the way. And as you say, feeling the connection to the unity, which is what Lynn said earlier, what nearly all the different speakers this week have said, is it's getting beyond the us and them, feeling that we're all part of an emanation, as it were, of the same consciousness, not just thinking the thought, but actually being able to experience it in the body. So a beautiful example of that. Thank you. And your last statement was such a lovely bridge to Hans, because Hans's latest book, like you said the universe couldn't resist, right? And Hans's latest book is called The Universe Loves a Happy Ending. So it was like, there you go. That's a lovely transition. And just because we've got like half an hour in total left. So Hans, some of you will have seen Hans on Humanity Rising before. I did a 4-year vocational training with Hans and his organization, the Center for ECOintention, learning how to apply a lot of what I'd been reading in Lynn's work, in Rupert Sheldrake's work, in all this other stuff. And, for some reason, I've never been drawn to the one-on-one coaching or the one-on-one healing. It's always been the systemic level. And so I was interested in what all this great stuff people are writing about. How do you apply it to large-scale systems, to organizations, to pieces of land, to communities, and things like that? And then, having asked the question, of course, Sujit, then I was kind of connected into Hans by the weird sisters weaving those strands together, and discovered really a very kind of disciplined practice that includes both the development of the practitioner, as well as the practice that's involved in manifestation, really, but then at this scale with these collectives. So Hans, I know you've just kind of run out of a training, so you've had a long day of training, and much appreciate you taking the time to join us. And I know you want to share a few slides for 10 minutes or so, just on part of the practice and what you've learned about it, and then we can move on into a discussion. So thanks for joining us.
Well, again, thank you so much, Peter, for having me and being in this extraordinary company. And thank you for your very inspiring talk. Sujit, I'm sorry, I'm from Holland, living in Germany. I'm not so practiced in pronouncing your name well, but the meaning is here. And also thank you for bridging, for making this wonderful bridge. Yes, we say the universe loves a happy ending, because I believe, but I know everything is developing to a higher complexity, and consciousness is, I think, the key. We come and go on planet Earth, and in between our consciousness grows. That's what it is. And like Sujit describes miracles, I've seen lots of them over the 20 years and happening. But the most extraordinary thing is that we can even predict when things are happening, and also can even know what is blocking them. And this is the whole practice of ECOintention, starting already in the early 80s based on radionics, working with devices, sending information to areas remotely, having huge success that time. And we started to copy this and to make it large scale. And we took on this practice from radionics over and learned that the devices were not necessary. So you took an aerial map, put it in a device, and they had some rates and sending positive vibes, and that worked. And later on, we found already in the 90s that these devices were not necessary. And we started working, what we still do, with a kind of energetic toolkit, learning students that each symbol has its own frequency, its own field. What also Peter learned, that you can sense from a mandala how it can heal. The Sri Yantra, prayer, everything has healing capacities, but they're all different. And the most extraordinary thing is you can sense this, but you can also understand it by your brain, why sacred geometry has a completely other effect, healing effect, than, and for instance, Bach remedies or sound or a mandala. And you can apply this to this. So we took this on, leaving the devices behind, but practicing this, and more getting aware the role consciousness plays, but not only consciousness, but for most of all, our heart. And this is all what we learned from HeartMath. When the heart is coherent, it has such a tremendous field. And this field connects us with the 0 point energy, what we also know from the wonderful books from Lynn, talking about the 0 point field. And this connects us with the energy that is everywhere. And then from the work of Rupert Sheldrake, we know there is a morphic field with information, and that's how we connect with our intuition. And when we combine the two, and this is in my book, The Universe Loves a Happy Ending in, so life energy plus information generates a formative force. And this is a kind of mantra everybody knows in ECOintention. Life energy generated by our attention from the heart, connected with information, intent from the mind. Intention generates this formative force, and this is the creative feminine force, the yin force, you can say. And this connects with matter, and then manifestation is the result of this. And what we do with ECOintention, we can in fact test dowse. We work with dowsing, with intersubjective readings, that we can apply this large scale. So at the moment, we do less and less and less, more heart, more intent, more consciousness. And then working on large scale, we are working with indigenous tribes in South Africa, but also with schools, corporate business, everywhere, applying this method. And if it's possible, I can share some slides, Peter. Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
I can see a little bit how we work. It's about 10 minutes, and well, this is us center. And you see, on our logo is Mind Moves Matter. It comes from mind over matter. This is where we're talking about at the moment. This whole beautiful week was organized, but we said it's not only mind over matter, but it only works when the heart is involved. So mind moves matter. That's, I think, the next step to make this more work. And we really try to connect ancient wisdom with also the latest science, and hopefully doing some good to our planet. And everybody think we are talking about, well, matter, but when we look into matter, we know from quantum science there is in fact nothing. And this is so extraordinary. We still be sitting on this chair, banging on this table here, but it's 99.999 and more space. And this is really what it is. But the space is not empty. And we know from the work from Lynne McTaggart, we can call this the 0-point energy, the vacuum. But this was always known as life energy, chi, mana, prana. Well, each culture had its own name for it. So it's all energy. And this energy are not particles. We also now know there are spins of energy. And this is a kind, those two vortices of energy generate a torus. And this torus is doing like this. And this is a kind of primal shape. There are no particles. Everything is a torus. And this torus creates a kind of donut in the energy. It's doing like this. So also your own aura. And it's always fascinating. I always say to people, well, trouble here means trouble there. You always look through your own aura to the world. So the first thing you see are the pictures, the patterns in your own aura, and you project them on the world. And when the world is dark, most of the time it's your own aura around you. So clean up your own thing. So this is what we see on large scale. In our galaxies we see this, and also in our own energy. Here you are, we can bring the chakras in it. This is, everything is energy. But now it comes, energy also radiates. So everything has its own radiation. You can sense this quite easily between your hands. We already do this in workshops, even together. And then you can sense this energy has certain layers. This is important because when a room, a soil is healthy, it has a lot of energy, it's vital. So it also got a high radiance. And now we have all those parameters we developed in ECOintention. You can sense on a land, in a room, in an office building, when this energy radiant level, is about 2 meters 10, the 3 layers, then you say, well, there is good ground for manifestation. When the farmer has a good intent for his plants, it can happen. When it's 120, when it's very low energy. People in this room will be in bad energy. Bad energy gives bad luck. Here you have good energy, you have good luck. So we have a lot of parameters. This is what we do with groups, and it's just not being online now, but we even practice this in winter with group. Peter was one of them. You can do this together. We call this intersubjective because everybody can have the same reading. And this is amazing. This is all possible. We also sense cosmic energy coming down from the cosmos. It's all perceivable and this is measurable. But we also know that energy vibrates, and this is something completely different. It has a tone, a sound, and similar vibrations resonate with each other. They reinforce. So a little input can create a large effect. We know this from the resonance principle to tuning forks applying this. But there are also fields with information. Now we come to this information part and resonance. Described by Rupert Sheldrake, morphic fields applied by Bert Hellinger in the family constellations, all working with fields of energy. And those fields resonate. There's the resonance again. So everything has its own field of information. Each place each home has a field of information, what happened there, each family has. And those fields are non-local. The energy 0-point field is non-local, but also the morphic field is non-local. And this morphic field can connect with when you have something similar to the place. So when you have a plan of the house, of a picture of the person, it's also resonating with this morphic field. So it's a kind of antenna you can use to connect with the morphic field wherever you are. Isn't that amazing? We human beings are able to do this. No other creature on the planet. We can connect with all the energy. Nobody else can. And now you can see also with your right part of the brain where your intuition is, in fact, home. You can also, by imagining this picture, connect with the morphic field. Not with the left part, that's your logic part of the brain that says yes, but, yes, but. So we always say yes, but, yes, cut. And when you go in yourself with a kind of, well, meditation, there comes relax. We can connect with everything by imagining it. This is our imagination. And you connect with this morphic field. Now we bring the two together. So here you see, with our intention, we can connect with the morphic field sending information. It's something we want to manifest. And with our heart, we connect with this life energy, with the 0-point field. And the two create this formative force. And this formative force is in fact one of the primal forces in creation. And to explain this better, we also work always with the metaphor of the wheel. So your life is a wheel. You are holding it, you are the captain and directing it to its destiny. And this wheel we know from many, many symbols. The mandala, in fact, it even means wheel. It also, our life is a whole, the universe is a whole. The spiritual world is outside and our destiny is in the center of the wheel. The Sri Yantra, we know this is also referring to this, it's a whole and our place to be is in the center, the pivot of the wheel. We know this also in the cathedrals in Christian culture, also the mandala, the rose windows in Chartres, and you find Christ there or the Maria, always referring to this is the center of where to be, of creation. Even the labyrinth is another symbol leading us there. And then we have those two forces at work. And here you see this formative force. And this is the mind force generated by our intent and our heart. And that comes from an idea, connects with matter, subtle matter, and goes thicker. And then we know from the work from Nassim Haramein in the center, we also find the black hole generating even the matter. And that connects with matter. And then if you find the expansive young force, bringing it into creation, and then in fact ending again in the entropy. So this is also sharing this in the yin-yang symbol, bring many things together. This is the masculine force that we all know. The yang force is the force we know the working in our engines of the explosion, bringing everything out. And here we see the formative force again, the mind force. It's also the life force working in nature, making the bumblebee fly. Because according to science, a bumblebee can't fly. It's crazy, but he flies. His wings are too small, his body is too heavy. But he flies, and I think he's working with the levitation of this wonderful force. So these are the two forces. And you also see here, it comes from there and it goes there. I will explain this later. And we can bring them in balance by our heart and our intent. And these are our steps. We call them the principles of energetic guardianship. And I don't have enough time now to go into this, but it's also in my book, The Universe Loves a Happy Ending. Here is the wheel again. Here are the two forces. And this formative force is in fact the left spinning going inward. And then it connects to the center with matter and goes out again, and it's right. It's like politics, because here you see this one is connected to the past. It's pushing us forward. But now you see that this formative force is connected to the future when you put it in time. So the formative force is attracting and also creating our future. Life is push and pull. This is what we do. These are the two forces. And these are the principles of energetic guardianship, relaxed concentration, being in a more meditative start, connecting with your intuition. We call it consciousness of the whole. You can only charge something with energy when you have a kind of container. You can really define the boundaries with your consciousness, connecting with your heart, a feeling for what is going on, expertise on the matter because you should know your business, what is possible, affirming those, there you the visualization. And then one of the most important things is transforming a burdened past. You can even call it your karma, because what happens when you start on your path of manifestation, starting with affirmations, you immediately start attracting what is still behind here, not being transformed. So many people starting with affirmation, well, I did it a while and it didn't work. And then exactly say, well, this is exactly, you're working well because you start to attract your burdened past, blocking this. Well, there's a lot more to tell. I have to do it quick in a few minutes, giving you kind of overview. And I think we apply this in business and teaching CEOs working with this. And everything is energy. I attract the future that I envision, and I transform all patterns and move freely into the future. And to make it full circle, here are the two forces in the wheel. And now when you put this wheel, you turn it on the side, then you see the two forces are the two vortices we started with. So again, this is more the metaphor, the two forces there, but from quantums you see now these are the two vortices connecting into the forces. So this is also how science and old wisdom are connected. It's in my book, The Universe Loves a Happy Ending. You find also more in Resonance with Nature, will be published soon by Ubiquity University. I hope it's been sold out, but we're looking for a new publisher. I think we found one. And this is ECOintention, offering a vocational training, 4-year, teaching people to apply this large scale. We work global, the distance doesn't matter. And well, this is us. You can find more information on the ECOintention.com. Well, this was an overview in a very short time, but I hope it was...
Great, thanks. Thanks for doing that, Hans, for sharing that and being so sharp after a long day of training.
Well, it still goes on. I'm not finished. I have to go back to my students.
Oh, you have to go back afterwards.
We finished 9:30.
No rest for the wicked, as we say. So, but just to pick up on a question and discussion that's been going on in the chat, talking about the wicked, people are asking, like, you know, so if we can do all of this, like what Lynn was describing, what, you know, you've both described, how does somebody, let's say like Putin, get so much power and hold so much power to make, you know, a certain effect in the world, or anybody else who has negative intentions? How does that kind of create so much of an effect and relate to, and people were suggesting, therefore, why does the light seem to be less stronger than the dark, you know, somehow? Either of you, any thoughts on that, you know, when we have all this potential for light and consciousness, how come there's such a mess?
Because it's our free will zone, and I think negative and positive are relative. This is what it starts with. And sometimes all the things of the Lord of the Rings, and we all have to throw our own ring in the fire. And Gollum, he was the one finally who threw the ring in the fire. And it was Frodo not killing, having mercy with Gollum, but Colin, and he saved him, and then he threw the ring in the fire, which Frodo should have done. So the first thing I ever learned, when you want to heal, you should not judge. Because it is nicht heilen, nicht urteilen, wenn man heilen möchte. This is one thing. We cannot see the larger whole. And it's the most difficult and important thing is to have the compassion in our heart. even for Putin, how difficult it may sound. And that's, I think, is a great example, always the Dalai Lama, who had compassion with the Chinese going into his country. And still, it's difficult to see. And as for many people, Putin is not negative. And Donald Trump is not negative. They think there is their savior. So it's quite difficult. And what we try to do with our work, to do healings for the Ukraine, to bring light and to do good. And I always think, do what you think you can do. And this is, I think, finally, we're all made to be great. So shine your light and be great. And if everybody does this, I think then we have a great planet. And also the dark will be. But again, when there is much light, there's also much shadow. And this is the days we're living in. We have so much light now shining on our planet. It's enormous. The amount of spiritual help what is available. Also from extraterrestrial civilization, I don't know, but there's so much light that throws a lot of shadow. So we have to face this.
Makes sense. Nice bridge with the extraterrestrial, because I know Jim will come in a minute and have a few questions like around that. But Sujit, just from your experience and, you know, the Indian culture, how and the mystics and things, what's been your experience of how they relate to, you know, the possibility of extraterrestrial life and relating to consciousness and things?
You know, for them, you know, for us, Peter, there isn't anything that is extraterrestrial. You know, that is to say that there is something extraterrestrial is to acknowledge separateness, that there is the other. There isn't the other. And intelligence manifests in so many different forms. And, you know, the most advanced minds are those who actually travel into different realms beyond time and space. So the UFO Act is just one artifact of our purposive evolution as humanity, where we are actually making peace with truth. A truth that the sages have always known and experienced through their astral travels and out-of-body experiences and all of that. So there isn't the other, there isn't the foreign object.
Oh, are you just frozen there, Sujit?
No, I'm complete.
Yeah, I was actually funny. I was saying yesterday, because when we had the remote viewers there, one of them who'd actually kind of remote viewed some UFOs and things, and we were talking about the conditions needed for communication, and his point was, don't think of it as us and them. You know, that was his core point. And here we have created this word alien, you know, that literally means the other. And so there's no way we're going to be able to communicate with aliens, because you can't communicate with the other, only through this realization of, you know, the oneness, the interconnectedness. So Jim, would you like to come back in there? I bet you've been listening with deep interest.
I have. And loving every minute of it. Hans, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Tim. Yes, wonderful.
And we all hope that your book becomes an international bestseller, and we all go down that yellow road to eternal peace.
This one needs to be rewritten again. It's an oldie but goldie, but I am working on a new one.
What I would like to do as we close out this session is to pursue the point that Peter was raising, because I think in many ways it's the $64,000 question. How can you have so many people of goodwill in a world that is clearly going from bad to worse? So I want to offer two comments on this from my own reflection, and then would love to have all three of you comment, because I think you're both right, but I would add two additional points. One is from Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War in his first inaugural address, where he said the irony of the Civil War was that both sides were praying to the same God for victory over the other. And I think that that's at the heart of the contradiction of intention, that I may have an intention, which, as you pointed out, Sujith, is part of a very complex mechanism and momentum between sort of imagination and manifestation. But we're always in a world of such infinite complexity that our intention is, in many cases, swallowed up in a much greater intention. And I think that that's something that is extremely important for us to bear in mind. We need to be very modest about the power of our intent. You know, personal intent is one thing, and I know both of you are dealing with this most of the time, but intent that seeks to change objective reality is a whole different level of complexity. And I would use Lynn's video about, you know, the people in Israel and Jordan, and they were all happy about this experience of ephemeral unity. But the reality is today that Israel, backed up by the United States, is committing genocide against the Palestinian people with a ferociousness that is calling up what the Nazis did to the Jews in the 1930s. And we're seeing in front of us on live TV a sacrilege against humanity that is almost, it's difficult to even take it in. And so when we think about intent, and this is the second point I think I would bring in, the intent can be just as easily from the dark side as the light side. You know, the intent of the Israeli government, backed up, you know, by the U.S. government to commit genocide in Palestine, is there, if there's any representation of evil or darkness, we're watching it. And yet there have been hundreds of thousands of people on the streets calling for a ceasefire. There's been millions of people. And in fact, the entire rest of the world in the last Security Council vote, it was the world against two, Israel and the United States. Even Britain and France abstained. And there is no intent on either the United States or Israel to stop, despite all the intent. So part of, I think, what we have to bear in mind is not only the complexity of intent, but also that it can arise just as forcefully from the dark side as the light side. And therefore, our capacity to make a difference needs to be really articulated, it would seem to me, in a very modest way. And so anyway, I just wanted to bring those points in, and I think Hans had to leave, unfortunately. But Sujith and Peter, I would just love to have your comment, because this is a very rich and challenging moment in human history where we're literally teetering on the brink of self-destruction. And therefore, to understand how the intent of coherence and the good actually at the level of physics interacts with the intent and physics of chaos is maybe the most important question in the world right now.
Just a couple of thoughts, and then I'll leave it to Sujit. Thanks, Jim. I think it's important to distinguish between intent and what we actually specifically mean by intention, and intention connected to attention. What we found in working with the Princeton equipment, for example, in terms of how effective people are in actually moving the needle on what would otherwise be objective kind of reality, is it's first of all, it's the combination of the mind and the heart. And the mind directs the information in a certain way, but it's the heart that amplifies the size of the effect. So what they found, for example, at Princeton, that the men were good at getting things to move in the right direction, didn't get very big effects. Women were good at getting big effects, but not always in the right direction. So archetypally, the heart energy, being the feminine energy, got big effects, but not well directed. And the masculine mind energy got in the right direction, but not very big. And it was couples in love who had the biggest effects.
Amazing.
Right? Because they were combining. And if you think about the conclusion of what everybody has been saying over this week so far, it's when we have the experience of oneness with, inverted commas, the other, that we're able to operate in these realms. Yeah. So it doesn't work when we try to do it from the left brain, doesn't work when we try to do it from separation. Doesn't work, you notice, with the equipment and stuff at Princeton, when people try too hard and are contracted and are kind of, we're going to make this happen. Nothing happens. So there is something about love or compassion or connection that is actually what makes the effect at the level that we're talking about. Now, what we also have to remember is that this level of work is in the subtle information fields and is affecting the probability of things happening in a certain way, which I think is why, you see certain effects in what Lynn has been doing. But obviously matter, if somebody owns 10,000 tanks and decides to roll them down the street, matter is, once it's actually manifest into the world, is stronger in its manifestation power, let's say, because it's already manifested, than operating in the subtle information realms, which are still working with probabilities. So yeah, at that level, we do need to be humble. But I also feel that what we haven't really done as humanity is actually crack the code of how we could really be making that difference through this integration of the heart and the mind. And it's that practice, I think, that could help us shift the needle a bit in ways we're not doing, because we're still, particularly in the West, still stuck in our in our minds in terms of like, okay, I'm just going to manifest peace there now, peace now, and that's just not how it works, And we've so quickly, because of our education and culture, slip into the me and the other. I mean, it's a very profound place, to come from, where there isn't the me and the other, just because our language, by definition, creates separation. So anyway, enough from me. I'm sure Sujit has a lot more wisdom to to add to that.
Wow. And I want to be respectful of time too. But I'm so inspired by the reflections that Jim, you shared, and you, Peter. And indeed, there are so many layers to what you shared. Whether it is Putin or Israel or Hamas. And what comes up for me is, if we look at the overall arc of our evolution, the challenging times that Jim, used the word challenging. And Peter, you were referring to the word probability of any occurrence. This is not the first time that we are experiencing such suffering. That, yes, humanity's purposive evolution follows that pattern of suffering, followed by this explosion of collective goodness, or the heart frequency, or this critical mass of love energy happens. It does in cycles. And in all of this, for me, the most important reminder in what God shared in the last few minutes is, my responsibility towards myself, the power I have on the self. That yes, there is this one Putin who is exercising the material means at his disposal, where the probability of the occurrence of a certain event is high. And yet, the choice I have, I think Hans did mention something about judgment. The important thing here for me is Lynn speaking about intention, Peter and Jim, that yes, that could be happening, like it has happened during the Holocaust, or happened during the world wars, or happened a lot before that. Yet, in all those times, and even thereafter, soon after, there has been this very profound expansion of the subtler consciousness, the causal consciousness, the heart energy, the love, the experience of unconditional love. And so, yes, darkness precedes light. Ignorance precedes wisdom. Illusions precede truth. And for that transition to happen, though, the choice rests with me. What is it that I can do, starting inside out, at the level of thought and intention? That, you know what? If the orientation, the locus of my attention, Peter, Jim, is on the Putin experiences, or the Hamas experiences, or the Israel experiences, then I will only be infusing energy in the attention and intention thing, Peter, you were just talking about. I'm only giving greater space for a certain possibility to remain in manifestation. Instead, like I notice in most parts of India or Africa or South America, there are critical mass of people who make a choice to orient the locus of their attention and intention towards love, towards the incredible, the numerous, infinite numbers of experiences that's happening around them, which is completely populated with unconditional love, with bliss, with oneness, with care, kindness, with maitri. Yeah. And what suddenly happens, and it'll happen, we are evolving towards beautiful times. I'm absolutely optimistic about it, Jim, Peter. We are evolving towards the most magnificent, awesome time beyond these shadows that we are experiencing at this moment because of the important leadership, Jim, from you, Peter, etc. That we have collectively, and this group, group of 120, 130 participants, we are unified with one thought that is so expansive in nature, that is so filled with love. It's just a matter of having that critical mass grow. And we'll suddenly notice that even those of us who are on the other side of the table compared to Putin, who are probably part of the same problem, we start noticing that we are touching people who feel differently about situations. And then they choose differently. And when enough of us choose differently, we'll notice, the Ukraine story becomes history. The Israel, Palestine, the Hamas, all these stories become, again, footnotes in history. And that is what I want to take a stand for, personal responsibility towards the locus of my attention and intention.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Taking personal responsibility for the locus of one's attention. That's a beautiful note, Sujith, with which to close out our session today, because I think in some ways that's the bottom line. So thank you for bringing that in. Peter, why don't you make whatever comments you'd like to make and then tee us up for tomorrow.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, it's just been a beautiful and deepening as we go through the week. So thank you, Sujit and Hans, and sending the thank you intention to Hans and Lynn for their participation. Yeah, we wrap up the week tomorrow by looking at this question of consciousness technologies. So if this world is emerging, as Sujit's been describing, and we've heard from the various people over this week, what does technology start to look like that interacts with these fields of consciousness? And if, as Daz, who was the remote viewer, who was with us on Tuesday, was saying, the craft that these extraterrestrials, and we need to find better language, don't we, Sujit? Like that our galactic neighbors were flying, were organic. They were alive, the craft. It wasn't a piece of metal, dead piece of metal. And that somehow these beings were interfacing, as another living entity with their craft. They were melding in some. So, we're going to have to work out what are we learning about the nature of technology and the potential we have for our technologies to be alive, and to be responsive somehow to our consciousness. And tomorrow we've got Roland from Heart Math Institute, Roland McCraty joining us from Heart Math Institute, talking about the Global Consciousness Project and the latest technology that they've developed there to track the fields of consciousness around the world. And we've got Dr. Wolfhard Janu, who has developed this first piece from Weird Technologies called the Weirdoscope, which measures the collective field of consciousness in groups and actually can track when groups are having peak experiences, can track in football stadiums when goals are scored and things without there being any physical connection between what happens and the device itself. So we're on the edge in what in Dutch we say in the kinderschoenen, which means in like child's shoes, exploring this whole domain. And like Sujit says, it feels like there's a whole world about to open up. And I think a very interesting part of it is going to be this dimension of consciousness technologies. So that's what we're exploring tomorrow.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Sujit. And good luck, Sujit, on your pilgrimage. I hope it is worthy of a Netflix special, which I know is the intent. So we will all join you in the intent for a successful pilgrimage, and may everyone be safe and well. So that'll bring us to a close for today, everyone. We'll see you in the after chat. Those of you who are interested, you'll see the link in the chat box, and you received it in your Zoom reminder for the session today. And then we'll see you tomorrow for our 5th and final session of Science and Consciousness. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.